All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO Podcast with David Malaco.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Show. I'm your host, David Malaco. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to transform the role of CISO into that of a professional. All right, gang. Now, I've known this guy, our guest today, for a long time. Great guy, very active in our community, and he's a cybersecurity leader in the financial services space. His roots are in defense, space, and banking. And notable things about our guest today: he's an avid mountain biker, and he's a passive scuba diver, which I may dig into that a little bit. But before we begin, all right, so we're taking this circus on the road. We're going to be in Houston, and we're going to be in the Woodlands at the American Petroleum Institute Cybersecurity Conference, November 12th and 13th, roughly. We're not going to be on the conference floor, but we're going to be in the area creating great cybersecurity content wherever professionals gather, right? So connect with us if you're going to be around. Would love to meet up, say hello. You never know. I might put you in the interview chair. So, and then finally, before we get started, please like, follow, share. We've had quite the bump recently, and we really appreciate everybody doing that. The content obviously is getting consumed. Followers are going up, and we appreciate that. If you like what you're seeing, hit that follow button on Apple and Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, hit that little bell so when we get a new episode out, you'll know about it. Follow us on LinkedIn, and then share us with a colleague or friend, okay? All right, so now let's talk about being a professional CISO. In today's episode, our guest is Randy Potts. He is currently the CISO at Real Time Resolutions. He's held positions at DRS Technologies, DenCorp International, Dallas Capital Bank, and Experian. Please welcome Randy Potts.
Hey, David. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, man.
Well, great to have you on. I know, obviously we have this great community here in the DFW area, and you're a big piece of that, which we will get into. And I know I've had people give me a hard time already of why I haven't had some of the CISO XC guys on. I think I wanted to get my chops up before we were ready for that. But to get started, young Randy Potts, technology hit you at some point in time, and then I'm sure cybersecurity probably thereafter. Give me that good 1 to 2 minutes of when did that hit, talk me through the arc, and then take me in through to today.
Yeah, of course. So honestly, it goes way back. I mean, video games got me into this, right? And it's like doing the LAN party, connecting via like the printer parallel cable thing and all of that old school stuff that we did when we're older. And then that kind of rotated into the security space, which is, hey, it's really funny to make my friend's CD-ROM open, and do funny, send out little Trojans and things to people.
Right.
And then through the college career, I've always been big about communication, right? Communication is key.
Right.
And so that's why I got really into satellite systems. And so satellite systems to me was all about getting people in remote parts of the world communicating with the rest of the world.
Wow.
So I am a huge fan of like what Elon Musk, the Starlink thing, like getting people connected, that's huge. And then really quickly working on satellite systems, security came right back to me of like the number one reason for my downtime was security issues. People in remote places do things to keep themselves entertained. We call that porn and gambling, which comes with a lot of malware.
Absolutely.
And so I quickly became the security guy. And so I worked in the defense space. And, of course, government auditors show up and they go, hey, how are you securing our networks? And it was like, oh, Randy's the guy who does that. He's the one monitoring traffic and playing whack-a-mole whenever stuff pops up. And so, and then it became a career. So I, very early on, became the security officer for the company. And it was really interesting because it was defense space, big government contracting entities who really lacked security. I mean, this was early 2000s stuff, so it was pretty immature at the time. And, they kind of got stuck with me because I was the only one.
So talk to me a little bit about the arc, right? So you got there, you're in cybersecurity, you're doing the job. I see ISO on there, right? That's kind of the precursor or a little early. Like I get that broad experience as for a CISO, but you're not the chief title yet. So talk me through the arc of how you got to that level.
Yeah, honestly, it really came about. So I was like most CISOs, actually, I don't even know if it's most CISOs nowadays, but I was a geek, right? And I was just the guy who had the knowledge. And, it was really interesting because other IT folks would always be like, oh, this is the smartest IT guy, that's why he's in security. And it's like, yeah, I was just the biggest dork, You're like, I went to UT Austin, and I'll tell you, I hate UT football because whenever there was a football game, I couldn't go to my lab. And I wanted to go to the lab. Like, that's how big a dork I was. I was like, oh, there's football at this school? UT has a football team? I have no idea. So, that was just me. I was the geek. And so they were kind of stuck with me. And it's really interesting. It just kind of progressed kind of as the professions progressed. So I've always been the security guy at the company. And it's just kind of evolved over time where we got more and more visibility. And I'll never forget like the first RSA conference I went to, and I think Chertoff was the defense secretary at the time, and he actually spoke at the RSA. It was like 2008, and I was like, man, InfoSec is finally like, people are realizing the problem, and so as it's elevated through the business, that title just kind of kept elevating too. And so,
So you rode the wave, is what it sounds like.
That's exactly what I did. Yeah.
But not in a bad way, obviously. You gotta have the chops, of course.
It was perfect. Yeah.
So I think that ties in great to the standard question I ask everybody, right? Which is, we are on this journey, right? And I purposely named the show the Professional CISO because it's specific but very nebulous at the same time. Is that something we need to do, right? If so, what does that mean to you, right? As a practitioner, again, being the geek now coming through and being that executive, what does that mean to you? And the other side of it is, if not, sure, why? But why, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So absolutely something we need to do. And I think a lot of businesses are just kind of stuck with us, right? Like, I have to tolerate these dorks and the things they make me do to be secure because otherwise it disrupts my business.
Right.
And the problem is that doesn't really mean they want us around.
Right.
And so we need to get it to where we actually have enough value to the business that they want us around and they get it. And so that's a big part of where I'm at now. I've been there for 10 years, and a big part of that is they really get the security piece of the business. Again, we're in financial services. They know, hey, we have a breach, the business goes away essentially, especially being a smaller financial services company. And so, they want me around. It's not like they have to have me. They just kind of get how I fit in with the business. And I talk about being draconian, but I'm not that draconian. I try to be reasonable. And I think that's a big part of it. I think we spend a lot of time in our profession jumping up and down and saying, we have to do this, the sky is falling, and the sky doesn't always fall.
The FUD.
Yeah, the FUD piece.
Right. So, and I heard you say something in there where we have development to do as a role, as a group of people, right? Because it's the high water mark, or because people are out there doing it right, and people that are out there that are not necessarily doing it as correctly, or as developed in their role. So, how much of it is it on us that we need to bridge that gap, but how much of it is it acceptance as well, that we're also should be a member of the C-suite and have that seat, proverbial seat at the table?
No, it definitely takes two. So, and that's the problem, is a lot of businesses are looking for any reason to do the bare minimum. And I think that's where a lot of people are, is it's a checkbox compliance thing. If I didn't have a regulation telling me I had to do security, I probably wouldn't do it. And that's why that's going to get them coming to us. But then we need to make it valuable, right? So once they come to us, they need to go, oh man, these people are actually really awesome. And man, they actually bring a lot of value to the business, and they help me understand my business better and my data, especially. That's the hot commodity now. And everybody's kind of getting out of the data hoarding stage, I want to say. Like that's why Data Lake was so popular. Everybody was like, I need all the data.
Right.
And
Give me
now
all your data.
It's really interesting because with AI is kind of bringing in this new like data analytics wave, and people are like, hey, what's useful data though? And so, I think we're the people who have been there like, hey man, I've been ingesting, 20,000 events a second and realized it was pretty useless.
Right.
And so we kind of know a lot about data and how to kind of like weed your way through it and figure it out, and really just control that data and, data retention, things like that. Like, hey, 10-year-old data really isn't that valuable. Maybe some of it is from like a macro level. So keep that stuff, but don't keep it all.
Right. funny enough, you keep leading me in these directions with your answers. You have we talk about the data and you know how much of a purview that the CISO has over an organization. Recently, I've seen multiple CISOs pull in other responsibilities, and it seems to be starting a little bit of a trend now. What are your thoughts on that? Are we going to see that continue? Is that something that I think that the next generation or those folks coming up need to prepare for?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I think honestly, just be flexible and do what the business needs of you, you know? So like in my role, I'm technically head up our facilities team. I head up operational risk, things like that. So things that aren't typical CISO.
Right.
But you know, I think honestly, just be open and just go with what makes sense.
So would it be a case of develop yourself into a more general executive, thereby making yourself more useful to the company, even though your specialty, right? Because everybody has their specialty where they grew up, like
Yep.
the CFO or operations or CEO, probably somewhere else. Same idea.
Yeah. Be an executive sponsor, right? It's about just being a good leader.
Right.
And so I think if you just make yourself a better leader, then people turn to you and want you to lead other things. I think that's a good outgrowth from like, we're not just stuck with this guy for security.
Right.
When they turn to you and go, hey, can you lead up this thing? And then you go, yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay, so honestly, we didn't script this, but now you're leading. You're talking about leadership. Now we're going to go into what you've been doing as far as building community, right? So you are a leader in this community. From a building perspective, I think I had said something the other day on LinkedIn with you guys after your last conference, which is you guys are great stewards of our community. Talk to me about, let's start early, like what got you started? Why did you hear the call?
Yeah.
All the way through to how did it come about into what's the value? Let's go those kind of three.
Yeah,
nuggets.
absolutely. Yeah, so I think COVID was the biggest thing because we weren't getting together. The communities were kind of falling apart, right? Nobody was talking to each other. And so I started inviting people to go for walks with me, go for hikes and things. And that group just kind of grew and grew. And Cecil started doing his selfies and posting them on LinkedIn. And people started going, hey man, I'll come to lunch with you. And we just, I think the lack of community during COVID just underscored how important it was.
Right.
And especially just me personally, being able to talk to other people, compare notes, like, oh my God, it's beyond valuable, And so that's what led to, we all need to talk to each other. And so anything that gets that conversation going, being able to share, I love the podcast that you're doing because
Thank you.
it allows me to learn more from my peers. Because as much as I go to the conference, so we do the conferences because you kind of get connected.
Right.
But then, man, trade that phone number and start having that discussion.
Right.
And so we've created like this WhatsApp group so people can chat. But then
Look at it all the time.
it's so awesome.
Yeah.
But that's the value of that ability to go, hey, I got this problem.
Right.
Somebody else has probably already solved that problem.
I mean, I've done it myself and I've responded to some myself. I mean, it is invaluable when you just like, I don't have exposure to that. And I know somebody else in this group has for sure, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
totally agree.
I mean, that's the whole, me in InfoSec, we talk about imposter syndrome a lot.
Yeah.
And we all have it. There's weaknesses that we have. And it's like, just being able to reach out to someone and go, oh man, hey, who knows about this?
Right.
And then somebody comes up and goes, oh yeah, I do. Awesome.
Exactly.
Just, you need it.
So let's talk about the movement through and from, so now you're here. I think you guys have done some things, you've seen different iterations and it's, CISO XC, you've landed, it seems like in a good place.
Yeah.
You kind of expanded, it went big, you kind of came back. It's,
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that process looked like, and then take me through to what's the future look like for you guys?
Absolutely. Yeah, we started, honestly, we wanted to do like a dinner with like 50 people or something, and then it turned into a conference.
Right.
And we just kept growing that conference, right? And I think we got to like 900 people. Wow. And the main feedback we got from that was, man, I really like the small sessions, but the big stuff is just too sterile. Yeah. Like I don't get as much connection from it. And so we just want to do more small stuff.
Right.
And kind of, we had this thought originally was, maybe we do like a huge Michael Farnham, HUSECCon, awesome conference, helped us out a ton early on. And so we were kind of thinking, oh, we'll just make this giant executive security conference. But I don't think it works. You know, it doesn't work for this. It works great for like knowledge sharing, kind of on the technical. Like I think of the RSAs, the Black Hats, the HUSECCons. I mean, God, there's so many of them. You know, GERCON. You know, all of those that are out there that are awesome. And we were just like, no, we need more to make that person-to-person connection, and that requires being smaller. And so that's kind of our model now. Is we're going to do more of this like 100 to 200 people tops, but then go to where the people are, you know? So we're gonna be doing a conference down in Austin, then we'll probably go to Atlanta, and we've got 10 or 12 cities where, you know, people from around the country have reached out to us and gone, man, we wanna do CISO XC in our city. And so that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna help people build their communities and tie each other together where they are.
That's great, that's great. All right, so I wanna move on to the next one. We have an image of CISOs. And I think one of the terms we used in prep was hard ass.
Yeah.
That's kind of our brand image, right? I mean, I think you even said it, jumping up and down a little bit of the FUD. Like, where are we at with that? Is that on the journey to becoming just kind of that professional? Is that on the journey of becoming that generalized executive? Like, how do we manage this?
You know, it's interesting. So at our last conference, we did this session on like mindfulness, and then Cecil and Anand talked about like how to have a happy team.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of that hard assness comes from, is just when you're in a stressful situation, you're really not likely to be giving out hugs. And so I think we've just been in a stress, you know, we see a problem that no one else has seen for a long time, and it kind of hardened us, made us mean, you know,
a little crusty.
And so, you know, it's a big part of like just trying to figure out how to kind of, God, I want to say like open up your heart, but it sounds a little too hippy dippy to me. But honestly, just like be a kinder person, be a lot more understanding of where other people are coming from when they haven't had to deal with this stuff.
Does this roll into being a good leader, though? I mean, is this like maybe just a dynamic of leadership that we might be missing a little bit? Or we go single-threaded because of the stress?
I mean, 100%. So I worked at Experian, and they did a lot of like executive leadership type training, and they do it for everyone, like especially around like emotional intelligence. You know, this whole thing of like, when you get angry, just don't start yelling. And so honestly, that helped me out a lot as far as like, you know, so I came from the defense space, and so I worked in Iraq for 2 years. And so you had all the like support people, which, you know, we had the Jordanians, I don't want to call them soldiers. They were like contract soldiers. So I worked in the contract space, and I'll never forget like yelling at these guys to do stuff. And then, you know, and I was like, you know, go do your effing job, you know, and turned around, and somebody was like, man, you're such a great leader. And I was like, well, this is the way it should be. And so it really, I mean, I existed that way for a decade before kind of realizing like, this is not the way to be.
Being a Marine Corps veteran, I can tell you the idea of people looking at you as a leader and going, okay, this is what I think I'm going to get. And I can certainly say I've worked hard over my career to make sure that I soften the edges. The culture is radically different when dealing with civilians, you know, rather than being in a war zone or something like that. But yeah, I think it's a case of, even to this day, there's times I still, you know, the edges get a little hard, and you gotta, you know, be mindful and self-aware, I think, is the key there.
I think that's a huge part of it, and just knowing when to take a breath. You know, do that. It's amazing going through that, you know, just taking that 2 or 3 minutes to kind of chill and not lose your cool. And just, you know, even, man, the president of our company now is like, man, he's so good at it. Like, I never see him lose his cool. And he's a fantastic leader. And so that's what I mean, that's where we need to be. We need to be good leaders like that, and push that down to our teams, so that way everyone's experience with security is better. And it's hard because there's a lot of burnout in our profession.
There is.
And so, but that's part of it, is we we care too much, which is a weird way to say it. So I often tell people you need to care less, which is really just a way of saying, don't just always be on edge.
Right.
Like you can't always be on edge. It can't always be, life or death, essentially.
Yeah, and Robert Pace and I had that conversation around compartmentalization. Like when it's time to walk away from the desk, it's time to walk away from the desk. And you can't retain that in here. Go on the walk, right?
Yeah.
Ride the bike, whatever that looks like for you, but you've got to get it out of your head too. It's not just a matter of walking away from the desk.
No, so that's actually what led me from hiking to mountain biking, is when I'm hiking, I can think about things.
Right.
And that's not always good.
No.
So I do go for walks in the middle of the day when I'm like, man, I need to think about what to do with this. And I'll go for a walk, listen to a podcast, kind of get some ideas on whatever problem I'm dealing with. The mountain bike is great because if your mind wanders, you will fall and hurt yourself. So you kind of got to be focused on that. And it's great because my mind isn't wandering when I'm mountain biking.
We're going to take the element of danger to get you out of your own head.
That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Love it. All right, I'm going to shift a little bit. You started in defense, and we talked about it a little bit. That's pretty unique, right? And you were not in the military.
No.
And that's not a dig or anything like that. It's more of a interesting. Tell me the story about, how you got into it. And obviously you went to Iraq, so your contractor space, fascinating. But then I also think there's things that you take away from that, right? And so talk to me about those learnings that you pull forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I got there because I'm actually an NSA brat. So both my parents worked for the NSA, and that kind of just led to everything. Just like my father was this guy who was just like always, how do you deal with this situation? What about the, just the constant situational awareness thing was just like ingrained in me from since I can remember, there's this story where when I was a kid, I was 4 years old. My father kicked me out of the car, I was just being a 4-year-old, and he kicked me out of the car in downtown Houston, and he just drove around the block. But it really, oh my God, it's talk about a traumatizing thing that makes you realize holy crap, sometimes you just got to depend on yourself, and you can kind of sit there and panic. But that's kind of what led me to getting in, just being comfortable with that. Straight out of college, I skipped my college graduation because I was on a plane going to a war zone, which is awesome. But just being comfortable with that was really just the way I was kind of brought up, and it's the people I had known. That's how I kind of got the job, was through someone I met at community college. So I graduated from high school early. I was going to community college to get kind of dual credit.
Right.
And I met a guy who was in the Army at the time, and we talked about he actually had deployed in Bosnia, and met the guy who was with this satellite contract. And so they were actually the first contractors into the Iraq War, because we had these satellite systems on the back of Humvees.
Yep.
And so it was really cool. We were doing video conferencing back then. And it was really fun to work on that stuff. And it was just really cutting edge technology. It's interesting. I was gonna either go with them from the defense contracting side, or go work on a company that does the communication to the Mars rover and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So really kind of cool, satellite communications was always kind of the thing I geeked out on. Rolling into the war zone was really interesting just because I was weirdly comfortable with it. Everybody's why are you doing that? That's insane. And
why would you go?
I was dude, it's so entertaining and fun. It was very interesting.
And I don't have to join the military to do it.
And I don't have to. So that was a big part of it is, I graduated in 2004. And so 9/11 happened, and it had been 3 years. And I was man, I want to go. I'm not wasting time, And so I really wanted to go and kind of support that whole effort. And so this is my quickest way to get out there. And it was really interesting because I've worked with a bunch of Blackwater, Triple Canopy, defense contract guys who were kind of former special operations guys, and they just kind of had that thinking.
Yes, they do.
One of our sites, so the contract I primarily worked on was destroying Saddam's old munitions. And so they kind of that was all privatized.
Right.
So these guys would go out and like they had to secure the sites, which was really interesting because I got to learn from that and like how we put a fence in the middle of a desert somewhere. And they'd just be like, well, this is a path where somebody's going to drive a vehicle in, and this is just there to slow them down so we can shoot them, you know? And you're like, so much of what we do in cyber, right, is like this sort of imperfect, like we just need to slow down the bad guys so we can detect it and respond to it, you know?
Right.
And so you really can't be 100% in security. And so I think that's the biggest thing I got from them is like, there really is no 100%. And then
It's a resilience factor, right?
100%.
There you go.
Yeah. Just being able to respond. And then this other element, which I always kind of use this example of like, you hire 2 guys to protect your car in the bad part of town or something. Your car never gets broken into, and after a year or 2, you're like, you know, I don't need the security guys. You get rid of them, and the next day your car gets broken into. You know, so it's the other challenge in security is when things are going smoothly, how do we kind of, you know, make people aware? And so that was something else I kind of learned from the contract world of security of just, you know, what do you guys do when there's not a war, you know? And so a lot of like one of the guys I worked with, he did like personal protection for Lady Gaga and stuff like that, you know? And so like just learning what these guys do, like post and just like where the threats are and I think that was really valuable to me of just being able to be dynamic.
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to why veterans make such good cybersecurity folks. You got that, but didn't have to sign on the dotted line, that's a great thing, I think. And obviously you hung out with or were on a contract with some high-level operators or former operators, which makes a huge difference as well because you're not out there with the rinky-dink, you know. No offense to anybody out there with the rinky-dink, but okay. So final topic before we get to 10 questions with Randy Potts.
Okay.
You're relatively young for a CISO, and that's not a judgment by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, you're one of the ones that are doing it right. Obviously, I try to, you know, I don't bring the wrong ones on the show. Talk to me about your experience with that. And I think there's probably going to be some good and some bad, or some positives and some challenges. So kind of talk me through both of those things.
Yeah, it was, you know, so it's interesting going back to the defense contracting thing. I ended up working in the Strategic Operations Center for the war, and it was really interesting because it was like all the leadership people. So it was these older, you know, colonels, generals, all of that sort of. I ran this like morning briefing that had 17 stars in it and stuff like that. And so it really just kind of matured me a little quicker, I think, because those guys, again, going back to that military leadership style, you know, I remember like one colonel, you know, and I was like, you know what you got to think about? And he goes, if you point your finger at me, I'm going to break it off.
Break it
you
off.
know? And I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to,
like,
you know.
Okay, well,
so,
hey.
Learning boundaries, I think, was a huge part of that, and just kind of learning, you know, my place where like I could speak up and not speak up, and, you know, just being understanding of like, yeah, I'm the youngest guy in the room, maybe I shouldn't, but then, you know, it was interesting. You just had to learn to let things come to you where people would go, well, hey, you're the young guy. You should know all this technology stuff. What should we do there? You know, and then just being prepared for that. And I think that's another thing I got from that was just seeing that sort of preparation of military leaders, you know, and how like they do a ton to like prepare. And there are plans that will never get used, you know, but they exist. And so that was one thing where like, you know, as a CISO, you're going to do a lot of work that's might not ever get used. And so, you know, I think that was a big help to me and why I was successful in that, you know, I got used to doing a lot of work that nobody would ever see. And I think that's a lot in the security space, right? If you're doing it right, you're doing a ton of work nobody's ever going to know about.
It's like the duck in the water. Legs are going, but totally quiet up top.
That's my joke all the time when people go, hey, what are you doing today? I'm like, nothing. You know, if I do more work, you know, you guys will have more work. You know, I'm just, you know, I'm not doing anything, you know? And so just that whole, you know, but really there's just, God, there's so much, you know? And it's something where, you know, I think that's part of the problem, right? Is you might try to justify yourself. And so it was a good lesson early on, like talking about, God, I probably gave my first report to a board when I was like 25, you know? And just learning from that of like, these people really don't care that we have 4,000 vulnerabilities and whatever, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
like learning that communication of like trying to, honestly just message to your audience, know who you're speaking to and know what they care about. That was a big part of it. So, and there were lots of like hard lessons, but I feel like I got a lot of mulligans just because it was a space where they were stuck with me, there wasn't like someone else. To all the people out there who have imposter syndrome, what I always say is like, well, more than the guy in accounting, So,
Right.
just make the best of it. Learn, try to figure it out.
Right. And so being a CISO at a younger age, what does the future hold for Randy Potts? Like where are you developing to then, right? Is it going to get old when you're my age?
Right. Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I really love it. Like, I really enjoy the day-to-day of being a CISO, of honestly just educating people, being able to kind of advocate for security. And, you see this exponential growth in breaches year after year.
Yeah.
And I honestly, when I first started doing security, I was not a security guy. I was a satellite systems engineer.
Right.
And I was like, hey, we're just going to teach all the technical people how to do security and it'll go away. It's going to be a 5-year blip on the radar sort of a thing. And here we are 20 years later and it's like worse than it's ever been. And I think the one thing that makes it really interesting is we do have an adversary who is also human. And they're constantly coming up with new ways. Our WhatsApp chat, right? There's this whole conversation about MFA bypass. And, hey, how do I steal a session token? And it never gets old, right? When you're like, hey, man, make sure you turn on MFA. It's your best defense. And, there's some other things you need to do, too.
Yeah, correct.
And it's always that way.
Right.
Like when I think about EDR, if I had EDR 20 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, what? We have this now? This
Got it
is
solved. Done.
And it's not even,
No,
because I get admin credentials and I just turn your EDR off,
Right.
And it's like, oh, how do you get admin credentials? Well, you call someone and they give it up and, okay, well, that sucks. Get somebody to click on a link, still works,
Right.
Still works. And so I don't see it ever getting old to me. I do realize at some point I probably need to like grow up and like work at like a larger organization. Man, I really like where I'm at though. I really like this
Nothing
like
wrong with that.
boutique finance type
Yes.
company. And I'm just really comfortable. I think, really for the next decade, I'm really kind of into the family thing, raising the kiddos, that whole
Right.
thing. And, after that, I'll kind of look forward. But honestly, right now I'm at a great place where I can really just focus on building communities.
Right.
And that's really my big thing right now. Luckily I'm pretty good at the day job. And so that allows me to help others. And that's really the thing I'm hugely passionate about right now.
Love it. All right. So it's time for 10 questions with Randy Potts. What's your favorite word?
My favorite word.
Yes.
Is this the swear word one?
No.
Oh, no,
This
just
is
word?
just a word.
I'd probably say absolutely way too much.
I agree. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it probably shouldn't be my favorite word, but it's absolutely my favorite word.
All right. Now we're going to go the opposite side. What's your least favorite word?
Ooh. Kale. I hate kale. Like I hear that, it just makes me upset.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why, but it does.
What area of your work do you find most interesting?
Ooh. I really like working with startups and just new technology. That is definitely, if I feel like I'm in the drudge of it, kicking off a POC with some company that nobody's ever heard of is what, and in the conference company, we really work a lot with venture capital people and say, hey, who are those companies? So you'll come to our conferences and be like, who the hell are these vendors?
Right. Yeah.
Because I want you to see things you haven't seen before.
What area of your work is most challenging for you?
Yeah, honestly, getting the other executives to buy in on things. Like, I mean, I'm pretty good at this, but I still get shot down, pretty regularly. So don't get discouraged, if you get shot down, because it happens. And that's one of those woo-saw moments of like, oh, okay, it's okay.
What sound or noise do you love?
Man, I really love like waves, so like Monterey, California, the Defense Language Institute is out there, and oh my God, I think it's the Monterey Inn. Like, oh my God, you can get a room, leave your doors open at night, just like listen to the sea lions and the waves. And yeah, that's pretty wonderful.
What sound or noise do you hate?
My children saying swear words is probably my least favorite. Like, they are at that point where they're kind of discovering all the words you shouldn't say. And it's just like, I'm getting tired of saying stop. Yeah.
What's your favorite curse word? What's your favorite curse word?
My favorite.
Yeah, right into it.
My favorite adjective is fuck, for sure. Yeah. And I'll just throw it out there. It'll be good.
All the different
Hopefully
forms.
Nobody's listening with their children. I don't think so.
I mean, it's like the one that's going to happen. So typically we don't get strikes on that. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I always think about being an attorney, honestly. It sounds really boring and arduous. Now, I report to an attorney. I work with a lot of attorneys. And that's kind of where I'm like, it's kind of an interesting thing. I did actually apply to med school and was going to go to med school. I was like 95th percentile on my MCAT. It was really good. My wife at the time was actually going to med school. And I went on an interview and I asked the guy, hey, so his wife was also a doctor. And I said, hey, would you do it, like both of you going through? And there was such a long pause. And then he was like, yeah, I guess. And I was just like, I think I'm signing up for hell here. Like, I think I'm going to bow out of this deal. But, being a doctor would be kind of interesting too.
What profession would you not like to do?
Ooh, that's a really good police officer. Police officers have a really hard job. Like, I hate saying that because it sucks. Like,
well, it's not an indictment on any of them, right? It's a personal preference. We've had some pretty interesting ones on that, but
Well, man, Rob Haldeman. Man, I talk to him all the time.
Absolutely.
Man, I actually want to get him talking to us about insurance because he, with the law enforcement background, had a lot of liability.
Right.
And that's where I'm just like, God, it's so much liability, so little pay. Like, it sucks, And so I wish we could make that
and
a
have
better
to be
profession.
exposed to really not the best parts of our society, right?
110%, yeah.
All right, final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear your God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
It's okay to fart. It's okay to fart.
That has got to be the best one
I'm
yet.
sorry.
I love it.
Sorry. Just like, it's such a stigma.
It is a stigma.
Everybody's like, oh, you can't do that. You got to, it's the one thing that we can't, occasionally somebody might let a belch out and they're, excuse me, it's okay. But
like, you're ostracized if you let one go.
Oh, dude, if you just rip it in the middle of a conference, it's just, you're screwed.
Yeah, you don't show up for a while after that.
Exactly. We all need to be forgiving. Yeah.
Well, we covered quite a bit. Hopefully farts become, acceptable to whomever's
maybe it's better
deity.
that they stay ostracized just for our own, ability to breathe,
But we covered, obviously, professionalizing the role, and I like your take on that. I think the community building is huge. Obviously, you're well on your way with that, and obviously recognized, all over the place. And we appreciate what you guys do. I think that's the other part, giving us a place to gather. As I put on LinkedIn, I said professionals gather, right? I mean, I think that's the key, and be able to have that ability to come together. But in the end, colleagues and friends, I renew the call. It's time to professionalize the role of the CISO. In the meantime, I wish you health, happiness, and success on your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO podcast.